Good day, fish tankers. As one gains experience in the hobby, one tends to pick up all sorts of different tricks and hacks and tips to save time and to even save a few bucks in this hobby. Is that something that will interest you, or do you have some good tips and hacks to share in the comment section? If so, stick around because I've got my top 10 fish keeping hacks. My first tip at number 10 is match your fish to your tap water. You can always adjust tap water, but it's a big headache and it can get very complicated, especially for a beginner. So if you keep a fish that suits your tap water, it's just much easier, but obviously you have to know what you have. So test at least your pH and don't throw away those syringes. I'll get back to it later when your test kit is done. But if you test your pH, if it's alkaline, the chances are very good that your water will be hard, and if it's acidic, the chances are very good that your water will be soft, but not always. So ideally test the pH, the GH and the KH, and then you know what kind of water you have in your tap, and then you can match your fish according to what does well in that particular water. That'll save you a lot of trouble in the long run. So once you know what kind of water you have, then you know what fish to keep. So for instance, if you have hard alkaline water, you can keep rift-lake African cichlids like these Mbuna and peacocks, and also various live bearers like your swordtails and platies and these mollies that you see here. They do well in hard alkaline water. And of course the big staple of the hobby, guppies, also do very well in hard alkaline water. And if you have soft acidic water like me, there's lots of tetras like these cardinals that do well in them, dwarf cichlids like this Apistogramma McMasteri, or even the king of an aquarium, the discus, if you have a big enough tank and your budget allows it. Then the next thing is bet on black. I like black backgrounds because I like to keep a bit of algae on the back for the algae eaters and the snails, and with a black background you don't see the algae. And I also try to have black equipment because, as you can see, this filter is almost invisible against a black background. You can have blue backgrounds that look very nice, but you're always going to be scraping algae off a back glass, and here you don't have to do it, and a bit of algae is good for the aquarium. Now you can simply paint the back pane of a glass like I did with this aquarium of mine here, or if you don't want something that permanent or difficult to remove, you can just use black card and stick it to the back, or this blackout, this window blackout that you use in cars, that'll help to make the blackout black. Now aquaswirl we know can get very, very expensive. This is a cheaper version, the Easter aquaswirl, and even that's 280 bucks for the smallest little bag of 2 liters. And that's my next tip. Use dirted substrate. What is dirted substrate? You can use ingredients you find in your garden center at the builders. Take 1 part of organic potting soil and 1 part of organic compost. You can just use the organic potting soil, but I won't use the organic compost on its own. It can be too rich. And then add 2 parts of palm peat and a handful or so of bone meal, and you mix it with a little water till you get a thick mud, and you put 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters on the bottom of a tank. There you see it. And then you cap that with at least 5 centimeters of sand. This has got about a millimeter grain size, so you can also say it's very fine gravel, but not your usual gravel. Sand or gravel, very fine gravel, not thick gravel. And yes, it does work. Look at how well those crypts grow in the dirted substrate in one of my tanks. Now the next thing is, I said about syringes. Keep your old syringes from your test kits and have some little measuring spoons ready, and that's for microdosing, because we use these little measuring cups for our bigger tanks. But let's say I just want 2 milliliters of this fertilizer here to add to one of my nano tanks, then I can pull it out with this syringe, and there I have 2 milliliters of fertilizer. So those syringes come in very handy like that, also when you need to add medication. And then you have powders like, for instance, Prime Safe, or in this case alkaline buffer. You can use a teaspoon of a big tanks, but now once again, if you have a tiny tank, these little measuring spoons come in handy, which you get at Clicks. You can have 1/3 of a teaspoon or 1/4 of a teaspoon. It just helps with a microdosing. So keep those syringes and measuring spoons for your microdosing makes it much easier. And I can just take the syringe and there's my fertilizer added to this little 7-gallon cube and done. Keep your old credit and debit cards. They make great algae scrapers. And as long as you use them right, at the right angle, they don't scratch the glass, and they're very efficient of even getting rid of a tough algae. Now, how often have we heard, oh boy, I per accident dumped a whole can of a fish food into my aquarium and now I have a problem. How does this even happen? It sounds such an idiotic thing, but it does happen because people do this. They take the can of food and they tap the food into the tank, they slip, and then all the food goes in. Decant your food first into a lid or into a smaller container, your pellets, your flakes, and then you have a right amount, and then you add that to the aquarium and you don't have a danger of that happening. Always get 2 nets. That's my next step. A bigger one and a smaller one, and use the smaller one to herd the fish into the net. Sorry guy, that was just a demonstration, and the smaller net is also handy for a dipping net just to get rid of small plant matters. Then use reusable filter media at number 3. The biomedia just runs out and you reuse it, and I love sponges. It's not only mechanical media, it becomes biological media as well, and you can reuse them forever. And I don't like filters of cartridges like these. You know, you have to remember to just change one cartridge at a time so you don't throw away your good bacteria, but they're never ideal. I would chip over them with sponges. I prefer filters like these that have sponge cartridges that you reuse, or things like hang-on backs and canister filters where you can put in your own media. And having a sheet of sponge like this is a great thing to have, because you can just cut off a piece that you need and you can fit it inside your filter. And there you see I put it in a hang-on back filter. There's a bit of extra polish. Sponges, I love sponges. Then we have load shedding in South Africa, but if you can't afford a lithium battery inverter troller, use an AC/DC air pump that switches, that runs, and when the power goes off, it continues to run on a battery. When the power comes back on, it just keeps going seamlessly. But don't just use it to run an air stand. Hook a sponge filter onto it and have it running permanently, so you always, whether the power goes on and off, have some filtration, aeration and circulation going in your tank. It's been a lifesaver for me. Doesn't necessarily have to be a sponge filter. Any air-driven filter will work, like this under gravel filter. And it doesn't have to be the biggest one like this big boy Sober. It can be a tiny one like the latest one that came out here. Now, the next thing, we liked our aquariums, but the one thing that kills it for most people are the fact that we have to do partial water changes. So that's my number 1 tip. Learn to streamline your water changes. This is how I used to do it, with 20-liter buckets. Back-breaking work, you strain your back. We all get older. When I was younger, I had more stamina to do this. But people, there are easier ways than just lugging buckets, siphoning into buckets, throwing away buckets, lugging buckets and topping it up. In America, they've got a water changing system called a Python. I haven't seen it here in South Africa, and I think it'll be very expensive to order it. So I've got my own version of that Python, and this is my number 1 tip, how I make my life easier. Firstly, if you don't already have it, make sure your house has got a mixer tap in, so you can mix a bit of warm water with cold water, and then have some garden hoses. They work best because you can find adapters for them. And then you need a canister filter intake sieve or intake there, a hose clamp and a hose adapter, and then this very nifty you can find on Takealot indoor tap adapter. This will screw into any tap that you have, and you can connect your hose to it. So then you put the hose with a canister intake there on the end of the hose so you don't suck up any fish into your aquarium. You fix it with a hose clamp and you just siphon the water out into the garden or even into the toilet or into a gutter, depending on what your home situation is, and that's how you drain your water out. Remember to switch off your heater. And then here's the adapter on the mixer tap. You just take that end, you fix a hose adapter on and you click it in there, and from there on, after you set the temperature right with a mixer tap, you just pipe the water back in. Remember to add water conditioner like Aqua Plus or AquaSafe or Prime. I'm not sponsored by any of these products. And that canister filter intake disperses the water so that you don't disturb your substrate. Well, that's it from me, guys. If you liked this, if you found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing. Let me know in the comment section what your top tips for easier fish keeping are. And until I see you guys again, keep taking good care of those domestic denizens of the deep.